get that
We're
bug.
still here.
Having never seen
Reaction.
either of the previous two movies, Bad Boys for Life was more or less exactly what I expected, just with some nice cinematography. I don't know how else to describe how I feel about this movie, aside from saying that it felt like an AI was working from a checklist of basic action movie tropes and then melded them all together for the final result. And despite all that, I kind of liked it. Its strongest aspect is definitely in how it looks. They put a surprising amount of effort into making the action scenes look really nice. It was definitely the most memorable part for me. Everything else, though, I already feel like I've seen 100 times. Although I have a feeling I would have appreciated it more had I seen the other two, so I'll get on that soon. One of my proudest achievements of this year was finally getting to the elusive of a friend of mine who forced me to sit through the entirety of Fate Stay Night Unlimited Blade Works. The series just as confusing as the title is. I know I didn't hate it, it's just really not my thing, to be honest, despite some very strong animation, which I assume the studio can afford because a majority of the show is just characters standing around talking and explaining how the plot works. Fate Stay Night, Heaven's Field 3, Spring Song Jesus is quite obviously the third in a trilogy, animating an alternate route of that the series is based off of. The first two films I felt were huge improvements to the show, but sadly this one was more in line with what I had come to expect. As I said before, my biggest complaint about the series is all of the expository dialogue that takes up a solid 70% of the show's runtime, and I was pleasantly surprised to find that the previous two films somehow managed to avoid this. Well, I guess they saved it all for this one, because they just did not shut the fuck up. Around midway, Spring Song kind of lost me with its plot, so I really felt no connection to the ending or resolution for the characters. I know the series is notorious for being confusing, but come on! But it certainly delivered on the series' trademark stellar battle animation, so at least there was that. After taking 400 years to come out, I was hell-bent on watching The New Mutants purely out of curiosity, and I liked it. I have to agree with the general consensus that it would have been improved had the horror elements had more of a focus and were more consistent, which is very annoying because that's exactly what everyone who watched it said and what the director himself said, but then the studio was like, nah. There's a lot of mature subject matter that's integrated into the story really naturally too and didn't feel out of place to me, which I really appreciated. Initially, I couldn't say I was fond of any of the main 5 characters, but they all grew on me by the end. Even Magic, who started out as cartoonishly evil, it still didn't feel like a fully fledged superhero horror to me, which I still think is an idea that could work really well and kind of already has. But I think The New Mutants' scattered direction is more the studio's fault than anything. In spite of all those problems, I still had a pretty good time with it. The ending definitely didn't go the way I thought it would, though, let me tell you. As a very big fan of alien horror, I was very excited to watch Sputnik, which did not turn out to be what I expected at all. Overall, I can't help but feel underwhelmed by this one. The soundtrack was fantastic, some of the shots looked really nice, and the CG and effects work were all extremely well done. But it is a bit of a slow burn that doesn't amount to a final act as satisfying as what I had hoped. If anything, it feels a bit restrained, though maybe it's because I went into this anticipating a horror, when in actuality it's more of a thriller drama. I quite like the premise though. It certainly was a far cry from the Russian alien-like movie set in space I thought it would be, although that name is very cheeky when you work out the meaning of it. Violet Evergarden is a gorgeously animated series that I made the genius decision to watch while on the bus to school last year, because the only proper way to appreciate all of the hard work and care put into the visuals is to be constantly worrying about hiding it from the people sitting behind me. I'm assuming that's the reason that despite the incredible presentation that KyoAni is so known for, this series really didn't do all that much for me, because it's been very well received. Like, I liked it, without a doubt, but it just hasn't stuck with me like a lot of other anime I've seen. Despite that, though, I really wanted to see how the series concluded, since the show wrapped up on a very open-ended note. I know it had been a while since I'd been with these characters. Violet Evergarden, the movie, continued on from the show several years later to wrap up a few of the loose plot threads left hanging over from the series' ending, which I must say was very satisfying. I'd have to say my favorite part was the introduction of telephones for the era because of the time skip gradually making letter writing obsolete, which was a recurring plot point I really enjoyed. It added a sense of finality to it all, considering one of the major aspects of the series was slowly becoming irrelevant. Though maybe a little overlong at nearly 2.5 hours, I thought it was a solid ending for a show that I definitely owe a rewatch to. This one gets a thumbs up from me. That makes sense if you've seen the movie, trust me. So this year I was introduced to a horror-only streaming service called Shudder, and then proceeded to accidentally pay for a year's worth of it somehow. So that's neat. One of Shudder's newest exclusives is Host, a movie set entirely on a Zoom call in the same vein as Unfriended, but with actual creativity and talent behind it. I was smiling the whole way through in spite of how on edge I was, in particular because of the way they did the credits and their acknowledgement of the movie's hour-long length. I don't want to give anything away, but you know if you've seen it. I felt like I was actually watching a genuine genuine conversation between friends. And the added context of having it set during 2020's still relevant quarantine definitely added to the believability for me. Host gets really tense at times. It goes for a less is more approach to its scares, which is way more effective in horror, in my opinion, than constantly being bombarded with loud noises. Not to say that it's jump scare free, but I'm pretty sure Host holds the record for having the first jump scare that I actually kind of liked. I don't know what's wrong with me. I have to say it was very strange to have a film referencing the lockdown and masks though. I don't know how well this one will hold up post-COVID, but the fact that they were able to make something this good while in the middle of a pandemic is super impressive. So apparently WB is making hyper-violent Mortal Kombat animated movies now, and I am all here for it. I can't say I've been a huge fan of their straight-to-video DC lineup, but I do watch them from time to time, and they always find a way to sneak in a lot of violence. And that made me very excited when I thought they made a Mortal Kombat movie with nothing but over-the-top violence. Contrary to the title, much of the story isn't even about Scorpion. They sort of retell the events of the first live-action movie, and I assume the game that I haven't played. So as well as Scorpion, you get a lot from Sonya, Liu Kang, and Johnny as they introduced to the Mortal Kombat tournament for the first time, which I enjoyed just as much as the Chinese counterpart. The humor was really great too, though there was this weird running joke where Johnny Cage keeps getting kicked in the balls a lot. I don't know what that was all about. Biggest complaint without a doubt has to be the absence of techno music during the fights like the first two live-action films before it though. It just feels empty without it. Even though I have zero interest in the games, I'd love to see more of these, so by all means, WB, keep them coming. Around the time that cinemas were finally starting to open back up again, my mum decided that she wanted to go out to see a nice, light-hearted movie, and ended up deciding on Unhinged, a movie where Russell Crowe terrorizes a woman and her child because they hugged him once. Needless to say, much of the movie's runtime was spent clutching onto each other for dear life. This is definitely one that I think I enjoyed a lot more because I saw it in theaters and with company after not being able to go out for so long. Though I still think Unhinged is a really tense, concise thriller that doesn't let you stop stressing out until the very end. So thanks in part to some very dumb decisions by the main characters, but hey, I wouldn't be thinking clearly if Russell Crowe was chasing after me either. Perhaps the most notable thing about Unhinged though is that they used Fortnite as a main plot point later on in the film, which if we're being honest, they said like 5 stars from that alone. Also, the studio acknowledged my review highlighting this fact on Twitter, so that's an extra 10 stars. This one was super cute. The main girl Muge was super cute, and the cats were super cute, and this is just a really cute movie. A Whisker Away doesn't have the strongest of plots, but the endearing characters and gorgeous visuals really made me love it. I'm a pretty big fan of animated slice of life, and this one gives you not only that, but also whimsical fantasy elements that are just so pleasing to look at. I love the magical aspects of it just as much as the coming-of-age drama, and there were a lot of standout moments for me. I think A Whisker Away has just been obscured a bit by the other incredible anime films that have come out in recent times. I'm not sure if I can agree with the supposed message of pestering someone who is clearly not interested in you until they like you back, but hey, we'll let that slide for now. Regardless, I definitely recommend this one, especially if you're a cat lover, which I'm pretty sure I am now. I love the hell out of time loop movies. They never fail to make me smile with their creative approach to the concept. Except for this one. Unlike Groundhog Day and Edge of Tomorrow before it though, Palm Springs approaches the idea a bit differently, by having Niles, played by Andy Samberg, already being stuck in the time loop and being the one to introduce it to others rather than slowly figuring it out along with the audience. It made it feel very different to other time loop films I've seen. I absolutely loved the dumb humor. It's just my kind of thing. They get so much out of making ridiculous scenarios and characters with no consequences fucking around with people who do. And while not all of the jokes worked for me, I found myself laughing out loud more often than not, which is thanks to the fantastic script and language. Everyone in this was really good. Put your hands above your head!
That's my dick, officer, bitch!
Plus, they tie up a very important loose end in the post-credit scene. It had me worried for a second this movie is that good. This year has been going on for so long that I totally forgot Sonic only came out in February. It feels like decades ago. I already did a full video talking about the Sonic movie, but now that I've had more time to think about it, I do have to agree with the general opinion that outside of the fact that it's a Sonic movie, a lot of aspects of it were quite generic. The highlight of it for me was obviously Jim Carrey as Eggman. I've never had so much fun watching someone have fun in a role before, and the movie would not have been what it was without it. Call it a publicity stunt or not, I just find it so incredible that they managed to turn what was, for me, one of the least anticipated movies of all time into one I really loved just by listening to people and their cries of terror at the reveal of the original design. I'm almost kind of grateful in the way that they went through with actually making him look like Sonic. This could have been a lot worse. Sonic had me grinning ear to ear as it went on, and I'm super excited to see what they do with the sequel. Though obviously there's a lot of bias to me since I'm such a Sonic fan. I've already talked about this film a lot, so I'll move on before I repeat myself too much, but Sonic for sure had to be the biggest surprise of 2020.
Love this song.
I I totally misinterpreted what this movie was about. For some reason, I had it in my head that this would be a funny comedy movie about a gamer stumbling his way through a zombie apocalypse, totally unaware of what was going on. And the title certainly didn't help. But as it turns out, there's nothing funny about this movie except that there's a song in the soundtrack that uses the incessant noise. That was weird. Alive is way too suspenseful at times. The film makes excellent use of its setting to provide a totally fresh take on the
Season 3.
It was super interesting to see the perspective of some random dude stuck in his apartment while all the shit went down outside. The zombies were a little inconsistent, and I'm sure there's a lot to nitpick in terms of the characters' decisions for those who have any form of common sense, but I don't care, to be honest. I probably would have just thrown myself off the balcony a day in. And hey, it only has a few jump scares. Another of this year's discoveries for me is that you can in fact go to the movies by yourself, with the only downside being the judgment of the person you buy the ticket from. My first experience with this was The Invisible Man, which proved to be difficult when I had no one to grip onto in fear. A big draw for me was that the director also did Upgrade, another fantastic movie I suggest checking out, and it definitely shows in this with all of the cool camera tricks they pulled off. I'm struggling to work out how to explain this without sounding like a child, but my favorite kind of horror is when you only see the brief glimpses of the monster or entity as they chase after the protagonist, and this movie did that in spades, with him being invisible. I just wish the trailer didn't give away so many of the best scenes of the movie, but I guess that's just how it is now. I didn't find it necessarily terrifying as much as I did ridiculously intense, but I had a really good time. It does a lot with an otherwise silly premise. This poster is horrible though. Why would anyone do this?
Hello, how are you? I am under the water.
And continuing on my quest to give every movie that came out this year 4 stars is Underwater. A film I enjoyed way more than I thought I would. Underwater hits the ground running and doesn't waste time getting straight into it. Something I don't see very often is getting to find out character dynamics as the movie goes on instead of having those set up at the beginning. And I really love that the world building is grinding through visuals and isn't ever the focus of the scene. It's more about a group of people trying to survive a horrible situation, and it's up to you to watch out for the details and the backstory from there. In terms of horror, I didn't ever find it scary, despite having all of my biggest fears at once, being trapped in tight spaces, taking place underwater with mysterious creatures lurking around. CJ Miller. I found the humor grating at first, but it sort of grew on me as it went on. I think it stops the movie from taking itself too seriously. A lot of reviews I read compared it to Alien and the like, and while I agree it started off feeling very familiar, it does steadily become more of its own thing, helped by the incredible special effects work. Underwater's biggest drawbacks are suffering from a few Hollywood lines, as well as the fact that I can't believe we're still doing a silence leading up to obvious loud noise and jump scare in 2020. But the more I think about this one, the more I love it. I can't say much more about it though without giving anything away. Pixar coming in with one of the best films of the year right at the last minute. I don't understand what it is that Pixar does to their movies that just consistently makes me want to cry, but god damn it, they do it every time. Soul felt to me like one of their most mature efforts they put out yet. For the most part, it didn't really feel like much of a kid's movie. It instead just left me feeling inspired and made me want to love life. So of course, here I am editing a 40-minute video and it wants to die. The animation is of course gorgeous, and the fact that they're able to somehow visually improve with each release is just baffling to me. That being said, I am glad they embraced more of a cartoonish appearance for the characters instead of going fully photorealistic. To me, it made it stand out a lot more. And the Soul stuff has incredible art direction. Everything was really vibrant and visually pleasing, and it's Pixar, of course it is. I was far more invested in the real world plot than I was in the cartoony Soul realm, and to my surprise, they managed to blend both extremely well. On top of that, you've got a fantastic message and very entertaining character.